Her boyfriend didn't just leave her. He chose her sister at a family dinner in front of everyone. They expected her to crumble quietly, then disappear like a ghost. But 3 weeks later, she's walking into the city's most elite gala on the arm of Luca Darrow, a ruthless billionaire whose name alone makes grown men sweat. If you want to see exactly how a broken woman becomes completely untouchable, stay until the end. Closely, because tonight you and I are going to unpack a profound study in transformation. We are tracing the path of a woman who rejected defeat and returned as the architect of her own justice. Just 3 weeks ago, Arya Vale was the tragic punchline of high society. Her partner Marcus did not merely abandon her, he humiliated her, choosing her own sister during a family dinner. They fully expected her to wither away in silence, yet here she stands, crashing the Whitmore Gala on the arm of Luca Darrow, a man whose mere presence makes billionaires sweat. We are witnessing a shattered girl reconstruct herself into something completely untouchable, because sometimes the absolute deepest wounds we carry are exactly what teach us how to forge our strongest armor. The massive chandelier over the ballroom floor is a glowing monument to excess. Arya knows the heavy weight of this room well. Not long ago, she was nothing more than a shadow here, a willing participant in her own erasure. She used to force hollow smiles through lifeless conversations, watching Marcus abandon her to chase status. But that desperate version of her is completely dead. Tonight, the harsh light bouncing off the crystal cuts through the room differently. It feels freezing cold and razor-sharp, exposing the shallow masks these elites wear to hide their moral decay. It is a deeply isolating realization, but a vital one. We eventually learn that the brightest and most extravagant rooms often serve only to conceal the absolute darkest and emptiest human hearts. She stood frozen at the top of the stairs, her hand barely grazing Luca to maintain a strict boundary. She refused to cling to him like someone begging for protection. Instead, she claimed the heavy silence, standing as though the building belonged to her. Luca did not look down. His voice was a low, commanding rumble. "You are doing fine," he murmured. Arya swallowed her panic, whispering that she had not actually done anything yet. "Exactly," he replied smoothly. Below them stretched a suffocating ocean of designer tuxedos and inherited wealth. Somewhere in that gilded cage, Marcus was staring. Her treacherous sister Caroline was there too. It is a brutal truth to swallow. But sometimes the people who share your exact bloodline are the very first ones willing to draw it. Arya felt her jaw lock with such pressure that her teeth ached. "Easy," Luca warned, his tone laced with a dangerous edge. He kept his gaze fixed forward, his dark eyes sweeping the crowd like a predator evaluating territory. "If you tense up, they will smell the fear," he advised. "I am not tense," she lied, trying to project strength. "You are vibrating," he fired back, defeated. She exhaled a shaky breath and forced her posture to yield. He saw straight through her armor, which was both infuriating and grounding. As they descended, every head in the room snapped their way. Walking alongside someone with that level of raw power is deeply dangerous. Yet sometimes you absolutely need a catastrophic fire to permanently burn away the toxic rot of your old life. For his own calculated reasons, Luca chose to escort her into the social slaughterhouse tonight. As their shoes met the floor, a waiter materialized. Luca claimed 2 glasses, pressing one into her hand. "You do not even have to drink it," he murmured. "Just hold it to give your trembling hands a purpose." "I know how champagne works," she snapped. "Do you?" he asked, a slight smirk crossing his face. Then his voice dropped to a grave whisper. 11 o'clock, Marcus just spotted you." Arya felt her heart slam violently against her ribs. "What does he look like?" she asked. "Like a man who just realized his entire world is over," Luca replied. "It is a profound irony. Life has a poetic way of dragging our absolute worst mistakes straight to our front door, precisely when we think we are safe." Marcus was paralyzed beside the mahogany bar. His drink hovered in the air, his face drained of color as panic fractured his composure. It was a spectacular psychological collapse. Arya deliberately shifted her gaze, dismissing him like a mere smudge on the wall. "How do you feel?" Luca asked, his voice slicing through the music. "Like my stomach is in knots," she confessed. "That is expected," he assured her. "You are incinerating 3 years of trauma in mere hours. I would question your sanity. If you were not terrified." They navigated deeper into the glittering labyrinth. "Pay close attention, because you and I both know this truth. Discovering the hollow nature of the people you once loved is often the absolute quietest, most agonizing wake-up call a human being can endure." A socialite in emerald silk snapped her neck to look, leaning in to whisper venom to her husband. An older couple offered Luca a rigid nod, poorly masking their judgment. These were the enablers who knew about Marcus and Caroline, yet chose complicity over truth. "Smile," Luca commanded. "I am smiling," she retorted. "No, you are merely baring your teeth," he corrected. "We have all worn that mask, a protective grimace masquerading as joy." Taking a breath, Arya relaxed her jaw, replacing her tension with a slow, devastating smirk. "Much better," Luca whispered. "Let us make them sweat." He guided her into the epicenter of the room. "Understand this fundamental lesson of survival. Genuine power is walking right into the predator's den and acting as if you hold the deed to the property." Marcus used to worship these elites as the untouchable architects of the city. A man named Robert approached, extending his hand. "Luca," he exclaimed with false warmth. "I did not expect to find you here." Luca met the gesture with an icy handshake. "I do not attend charity functions," he replied. "I made an exception." Robert instantly locked onto Arya, searching for vulnerability. "This is Arya Vale," Luca stated. He did not reduce her to a mere +1, he wielded her name like a heavy weapon. As Robert took her hand, his calculating mind visibly short-circuited. A nearby woman leaned in, feigning innocence as she asked why that name sounded familiar. Here is the reality of navigating treacherous spaces. True emotional grace is maintaining absolute stillness, while the vultures circle overhead. She focuses on editorial curation. Luca lied with untouchable arrogance. "You have undoubtedly seen her work in Vogue. It was an impenetrable deception." Arya was merely a freelance writer, but the gossiping woman instantly nodded to save face. "Oh yes, naturally," she hummed. "It is a fascinating phenomenon. Society will always validate the exact worth you fiercely demand for yourself." The idle chatter dragged on, pivoting to corporate acquisitions. Arya stood like sovereign royalty, her grip steady on her glass. She played the role flawlessly, offering quiet laughs, yet never uttering a single word. Complete silence is utterly terrifying to empty people who rely on their own voices for relevance. When Luca guided her away, he praised her flawless execution. "Genuinely did not utter a single syllable," Arya whispered. "That is the point," Luca replied, a smug satisfaction settling over his features. "You let their empty minds construct the narrative. That is the pinnacle of leverage." Arya took a slow sip of champagne. It tasted expensive, but entirely soulless. "I do not understand how you tolerate this environment," she confessed. "Practice," he answered dryly. She refused to accept that deflection. "That is a hollow explanation," she challenged. Luca faced her fully, his gaze heavy with brutal clarity. "Do you want the truth?" he asked. "I stopped caring the second I realized they are all terrified of being insignificant. Let us look at this together." When you finally strip away the tailored designer suits, deep human insecurity always wears the exact same face. Arya slowly rotated. The inevitable had arrived. Marcus stood mere feet away, awkwardly shoving his hands into his pockets. He looked remarkably diminished compared to the figure who had shattered her world. Exhausted shadows under his eyes signaled a guilty conscience. Or perhaps he always possessed this pathetic aura, and her devotion had simply veiled it. "Marcus," she acknowledged, her tone at absolute zero. He swallowed hard, evaluating Luca before his facade cracked. "Can we speak?" he pleaded. "We are speaking," she countered. "I meant in private," he begged. Luca remained motionless, a sentinel of pure intimidation. "Here is a vital truth about emotional recovery. Forgiveness might cleanse your spirit, but erecting an impenetrable boundary is the only way you survive." He tensed his jaw under the pressure. "Arya, please," he pleaded. No, that single syllable hung in the air, devastating and irreversible. Marcus recoiled as if physically struck. "I just wanted to provide context," he stammered. "I said no," she reiterated, her voice devoid of mercy. In that precise second, the architecture of his massive ego collapsed into dust. He appeared victimized, fully expecting her to cave and deliver the cheap absolution his toxic conscience required. "Stick with me on this final point. We never owe our hard-earned closure to the very architects of our destruction." "Enjoy your evening," Arya murmured, turning her back on him forever. Luca matched her stride as they stepped onto the freezing balcony. In the cold night air, Arya closed her eyes and finally drew a full, liberating breath. "Let us examine this scene together." The massive city skyline stretches below, glowing like scattered glass in the dark. Arya leans into the freezing wind, noting her ex looks completely pathetic on the ballroom floor. Luca, the syndicate enforcer, offers a razor-thin smile, telling her to let that man choke on the empty space in his chest. Inside, it is all hollow laughter and silver, but out here, it is unfiltered truth. When Arya asks why he is helping her tear these people down, Luca leans against the stone. His voice carries the heavy ghosts of his past. as he admits knowing the exact sting of being thrown away by the people he trusted most. The lesson here is simple. Never let anyone shrink your spirit, simply because they lack the courage to handle your true potential. We step right back into the heavy tension of the ballroom. Arya stares at Luca, looking past his tailored suit to see the loaded weapon underneath. She breathes a quiet thank you into the freezing night. Luca barely blinks, warning her to hold her celebration. The real trial is only just beginning. Pushing off the iron rail, he delivers the blow. Her backstabbing sister has arrived. Arya forgets how to breathe. Luca scans the crowd like a predator, pointing out that Caroline is still blind to their presence. Panic floods Arya, but Luca locks his dark eyes onto hers with iron conviction, insisting she can face this. The truth is, when fear completely paralyzes you, sometimes all you need is one person willing to bet their faith on the strength you forgot you possessed. Luca refuses to let her retreat. His voice acts as a heavy anchor against her panic. He reminds her she has already faced predators who would tear her apart. She survived the man who broke her trust, and she can conquer this room. When Arya asks what happens if she breaks down, Luca delivers a cold truth. She can fall apart tomorrow, but never in the sight of the enemy. She nods, pulling her confidence into a sharp weapon as they step into the lion den. Caroline is holding court by the champagne tower, acting like royalty. Arya feels her chest tighten, but Luca softly orders her to breathe. The lesson is vital. Keep your tears for the safety of an empty room, and never hand your rivals the satisfaction of watching you break. Move across the ballroom floor with absolute authority. The moment Caroline spots her sister, her facade crumbles. The room seems to lose its breath as that manufactured smile vanishes. Arya absorbs every ounce of her rival's panic. Luca maintains a terrifyingly calm stride, and Arya perfectly matches his dark energy. They glide past the traitor, close enough for Caroline to realize Arya is escorted by the most lethal enforcer in the syndicate. Caroline is left paralyzed. The glass in her hand shaking, Arya offers a writhen smile and keeps walking. When Luca asks how she feels, she admits her hands are trembling. He smoothly replies that she does not look it at all. The takeaway is simple. Confidence is often just a heavy armor you force yourself to wear until the metal finally becomes a part of your skin. The orchestra shifts into a slow waltz. Luca extends his hand, instructing her to dance. Arya hesitates, confessing she lacks rhythm, but Luca dismisses the fear. He notes that perfection is hardly the objective tonight. She takes his hand, and this hardened criminal pulls her into the center of the room with a profound gentleness. They begin to sway, entirely detached from the music. When Arya whispers that every eye is fixed on them, he calmly tells her to let them look over his shoulder. She sees Marcus at the bar, his jaw clenched in pure fury. Spinning under the crystal chandeliers, Arya realizes she is no longer the tragic victim of their toxic narrative. The absolute best revenge is existing in your own light. Forcing your enemies to watch you remain completely unbothered by their presence. I have likely experienced this exact kind of silence. Luca points out that Arya is smiling, his deep voice cutting through the music. She looks into his dark eyes, and beyond the cold exterior of an enforcer, she finds a fierce protective warmth. She offers another quiet thank you, meaning it completely. As the music fades, he releases her slowly, and the sudden distance feels freezing. He guides her out to a shadowed balcony, reducing the chaotic party to a dull hum. Leaning against the iron rail, Arya stares at the city and confesses she is waiting for the emotional crash to ruin her. The hardest part of surviving any profound trauma is not the initial impact. It is standing in the quiet aftermath, waiting for the delayed shockwaves to finally pull you under. Let us look at this piece by piece. Luca asks what she is waiting for. Arya admits she expects the pure rage to hit, but instead, she feels completely hollow. She wonders aloud if feeling numb is a bad sign. This is a common defense mechanism, occurring when a mind simply refuses to take more damage. Luca remains a dark silhouette against the neon skyline, suggesting she has already processed the pain. When she argues she might just be empty, he shuts it down. He locks eyes with her, stating she could have hidden at home and let those snakes win. Instead, she walked right into the fire. That is not numbness, he says. That is an active choice. True strength is not about feeling fearless. It is choosing to step onto the battlefield, even when your emotional reserves are completely drained. Arya swallows her argument, realizing this enforcer might be right. She made the conscious choice to face the flames. Suddenly, the balcony door swings open. A laughing couple stumbles out, but after one glance at Luca's terrifying posture, they instantly retreat. Luca casually checks his watch, announcing 2 hours is enough. When she expresses surprise, he offers a sharp piece of strategy. She has made her statement, and lingering too long only dilutes the power of her victory. Arya lets that wisdom settle. They take one final walk across the ballroom floor. Marcus is seething, and Caroline stares in absolute defeat. Arya refuses to give her toxic past a single backward glance. A black sedan idles in the fog. She slides into the dark leather. The lesson here is clear. Always leave the battlefield while you are still the undisputed victor. The second the heavy car door shuts, the world's chaos vanishes. Arya releases a massive breath she has been holding for weeks. Luca's tone softens, confirming she actually pulled it off. She admits she is exhausted, burning on pure adrenaline, but mostly hollow. He quietly assures her that is the normal cost of survival. As the sedan glides through the damp streets, leaving the gala behind, she asks what she is supposed to do next. Luca keeps his advice grounded. Go home, sleep, and keep breathing. But Arya presses him, demanding to know the real reason he stepped in to help. Retreating into the shadows of the back seat, he repeats his earlier truth. He knows the exact agony of being completely underestimated by the world. The lesson is simple. Sometimes, just waking up and taking another breath is the most profound victory you can claim. Arya refuses to accept that simple answer, pushing back until he finally cracks. When she asks if he will ever reveal the truth, this terrifying enforcer drops his mask. We see the cold armor fracture, exposing a deep grief lurking beneath his stoic exterior. He quietly replies that maybe he will share it, but not tonight. The car rolls to a halt outside her building. Stepping onto the concrete, she turns back to offer one final thank you. He nods, instructing her to rest before the vehicle melts into the heavy fog. Standing alone on the empty sidewalk, Arya feels a shift. The shattered pieces of her past have fused together. She walked through the fire of her own social execution and survived. The wisdom here is profound. The flames designed to burn you to ashes are often what forge your spirit into unbreakable steel. With me here, because we are unpacking the most crucial moment. It is that silent hour when the adrenaline spike finally drains. Arya tosses her bag on the counter, standing alone in the dark apartment. Suddenly, her phone screen illuminates the shadows. A text from an unknown number reads, "She was magnificent tonight," signed only with the letter L. She stares at the words before flipping the device over. Her hands are shaking violently, but it is not from fear. It is the overwhelming reality of surviving the flames. She stared down the architects of her misery and walked out victorious. Yet her throat still burns with heavy tears. She fills a glass with water, the sound echoing loudly. Here is the final truth. Surviving a brutal emotional war does not mean you get to bypass the devastating crash that inevitably follows. Arya presses her palms against the freezing granite, shutting her eyes. She attempts the breathing exercise Luca showed her. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale. But counting is useless when the emotional dam inside your chest violently fractures. The tears do not just fall, they erupt, scalding and relentless. She is not weeping over some fresh betrayal. These are the heavy sobs that tear through you only when you have worn armor for far too long, and your exhausted spirit finally decides it is safe to collapse. She slides down the cabinets, hits the floor, and surrenders. Time simply dissolves in the shadows of the kitchen. You and I have probably felt this exact breaking point. We absolutely must let the breakdown wash over us before any real healing can ever begin. When the crying stops, Arya feels hollowed out, as if the poison has been scraped from her veins. She falls into a heavy sleep, but morning arrives with zero mercy. Sunlight slices the room as her phone violently vibrates. She squints at the screen. 12 missed calls, 23 frantic texts. The high society vultures are circling the drama, desperate to unmask the terrifying man from last night. Then, one notification turns her blood to ice. A cold message from her mother, demanding an immediate conversation. Arya drops the phone, staring blankly at the ceiling. Her mother is back, and that means absolute war. The hard truth we all face is that the moment you think you have escaped your dark history, it always finds a way to drag you right back into the fire. Let us look at this piece by piece. The second Arya walks away from the gala, Caroline starts spinning a twisted narrative, playing the eternal victim. Arya has zero patience left for that radioactive family drama, but the phone buzzes again. It is her mother. The voice on the other end drips with that suffocating disappointment, designed to wreck your spirit, exhausted. Arya reminds her, it is barely 11 in the morning, then comes the heavy pause. Her mother reveals Caroline told everyone about Arya, leaving with the ruthless Lucadero. Instead of defending herself, Arya simply owns it. She confirms the truth without a single flinch. Sometimes, the only way to completely dismantle a toxic game is to stop hiding your shadow and boldly claim every single move you make. Conversation plunges into darkness. Her mother drops a massive warning, demanding to know if Arya comprehends the danger surrounding a man like Luca. He is a ruthless boss whose enemies literally vanish. Hearing this, Arya almost laughs at the bitter hypocrisy. She thinks of her ex Marcus, a man whose own brand of destruction was fully endorsed by this same family. She tries to point out the double standard, but her mother abruptly hangs up. Tossing the phone across the bed, Arya does not feel sad. She just feels the razor-sharp edge of betrayal, cutting deep into her chest. It is a profound tragedy when you finally realize the truth. The very people who are supposed to be your ultimate sanctuary are often the ones quietly pouring gasoline all over your front porch. Maybe it is pure rage, or maybe it is the crushing exhaustion of always bleeding out just to keep the family comfortable. Arya drags herself to the shower to wash away the gala, then brews coffee so dark it could wake the dead. Sitting at her wooden desk, all that burning anger crystallizes into freezing, absolute focus. She stares at the half-finished portraits on her laptop screen and methodically closes every single tab. That old version of her is completely dead. She opens her email, scrolling past the junk, until a single word jumps off the screen. Opportunity. This is exactly how the universe operates behind the scenes. The most brilliant open doors only ever appear the exact second you finally refuse to let the ghosts of your past dictate the direction of your future. She almost deletes the message, but a sharp instinct forces her to click. The email is from a senior editor at Prestige magazine, representing the absolute peak of the art world. The editor is aggressively hyping her recent work and requesting a formal pitch meeting. Arya reads the words 3 times, paralyzed by shock. It defies logic, because just 12 months ago, these exact same executives handed her a brutal rejection. She knows her brushwork is brilliant, but she never imagined she was ready for that elite tier. It is fascinating how we react to sudden success. We instantly start doubting our own true worth when a massive victory arrives, completely forgetting that proper timing and placement are just as vital as the actual talent itself. I know there is always a hidden catch. Suspicion hits her and she searches his name. There it is, staring her in the face. Luke quietly bought a controlling stake in the magazine's parent company 6 months ago. He literally owns the chessboard. He pulled his invisible strings to kick those heavy doors wide open for her. Arya sits there, torn between fierce independence and bone-deep exhaustion. Then her phone lights up, a text from him demanding lunch, stating a car is already on the way. Her first instinct is to reply that she does not require a savior, but let us be brutally honest. Sometimes foolish pride is just an incredibly heavy stone to carry. And the absolute smartest thing you can do is allow a powerful ally to help you bear the crushing weight. She hits reply with one single word, okay. By 1:45, a sleek black sedan is idling at her curb. The driver offers zero small talk, giving a stiff nod as she slides inside. They drift through the city, rolling into a forgotten brick neighborhood. The car stops at an unmarked door with faded numbers. The moment she steps out, the vehicle vanishes down the alley. Inside, the atmosphere is dim and heavy with unspoken power. Luca is positioned in the darkest back corner like a reigning king, his eyes locked on the entrance. He stands up, slowly, whispering that he cannot believe she actually showed up. Never forget this reality. Sometimes, stepping straight into the terrifying unknown is the absolute bravest thing a broken person can possibly do. I would show up, she fires back. He tilts his head and admits he was hoping she would. They slide into a velvet booth, just as a silent waiter drops the menus and vanishes. Arya folds her shaking hands and locks eyes with this intimidating man. She flat out accuses him of buying her the magazine feature. Luca does not blink. He smoothly claims he merely made a polite introduction. She refuses to back down, reminding him that owning the entire company changes the dynamic. He leans back into the shadows, asking if she is genuinely angry. He insists he only forced the editors to look at her canvas, but her art earned the spot. It sounds wild, but it is true. Sometimes you desperately need a complete stranger to recognize your ultimate potential before you can ever see it yourself. Arya shakes her head, claiming he has not even seen her real portfolio. But here comes the twist. He casually mentions he spent the morning studying her old website. His voice drops into a low register as he lays out the facts. Her paintings are masterpieces, and her only failure was spending years standing in the wrong rooms. Arya is completely paralyzed, feeling exposed. The waiter materializes, and Luca effortlessly orders for them in perfect Italian. She is too stunned to fight it. When the silence returns, he stares right through her, Fully aware she is questioning his motives, she whispers that she asked why earlier, and he completely dodged it. Listen closely. True connection only begins the exact second you stop playing polite games and demand the absolute truth. He goes quiet, his fingers slowly tracing the rim of his glass like a man standing over a grave. 5 years ago, he whispers, he was engaged to a woman named Isabel. They were the picture of absolute power. Arya barely breathes as he drops the hammer. 2 weeks before the wedding, Isabel vanished with his business partner of 10 years. The magnitude of the disrespect is staggering. Arya softly apologizes, but he brushes it away. He calls it the ultimate awakening. It proved loyalty is merely an illusion until the fire gets hot. Most people instantly fold, but those who stand firm invaluable. Here is the golden rule. Trust is a mirror, and once shattered, you only ever show your reflection to those who will not bleed while holding the broken pieces. The waiter returns with elegant plates of pasta, but Arya has lost her appetite. She picks up her fork and sets it down. She looks into his eyes and confesses she cannot figure him out at all, her voice trembling with vulnerability. Luca smirks, murmuring that is exactly how he prefers it. The table goes silent. The food is perfection. Yet to Arya it feels like cardboard. Her mind races, trying to visualize this fortress of a man being emotionally leveled by someone he loved. She finally asks the heaviest question. Does he regret letting someone in? Luca holds her gaze and replies that he only regrets choosing the wrong player, never the game itself. You and I must remember this truth. A heart that completely refuses to risk taking another brutal shot is a heart that is already resting in a coffin. To examine this moment where Luca's true origin is exposed, he confesses that his past betrayal was a brutal necessity. Without it, he would have become a man he despised. He made a calculated choice to be feared rather than remain a victim. When Arya challenges his endgame, Luca clarifies that he demands absolute respect, and fear is merely the fastest weapon to secure it. Looking past his expensive exterior, Arya recognizes a profound psychological damage that mirrors her own trauma. She quietly vows never to let her pain harden her the same way. Trauma is a relentless force, acting as either a dark emotional prison or a fiery forge. Ultimately, we are the ones who must choose the kind of armor we wear to survive, deciding whether we heal or merely hide. He instantly challenges her defense mechanism. He asks if she plans to become entirely cold and untouchable. When she nods, he dismantles that idea, pointing out that she possesses far too much empathy to ever truly freeze over. He notes that the genuine monsters in his world never pause to mourn their lost souls. They simply embrace the darkness and invent their justifications later. As the conversation settles, Arya admits that her manipulative ex, Marcus, left a voicemail. Her voice trembles with residual fear, unfazed. Luca offers a profound observation, allowing Marcus space in her mind is giving free rent to someone she already evicted. True liberation requires walking away and refusing to look back, even when the ghosts of your past desperately call your name. You and I can likely recognize exactly what Arya is feeling here, that toxic curiosity that threatens to drag us backward. She searches for a reason to relapse, wonder aloud if Marcus is genuinely sorry. Luca grounds her immediately, stating that an apology is often just empty noise. It absolutely does not entitle anyone to a second chance. When she nervously wonders if Marcus wants her back, Luca forces her to confront her own desires. He asks if she even wants him. When she admits she does not, he reminds her that Marcus' wants are now completely irrelevant. She confesses she is trapped, replaying the memory of his betrayal. This scene powerfully demonstrates that the most difficult chains to shatter are often the ones we willingly fasten around our own wrists. We have all witnessed this specific kind of quiet devastation. Picture the scene: Arya is sitting at a family dinner, and her mother casually jokes about future grandchildren. Instead of leaning in, Marcus completely freezes. Worse, he immediately shares a secret glance with Caroline, the woman he is betraying Arya with. Hearing this, Luca's demeanor shifts into something terrifying. His eyes darkening with protective fury, he demands to know how she reacted. Arya admits she choked down her disgust, maintaining a perfect smile until she could confront him in private. His response was a careless shrug. While maintaining composure in the face of absolute disrespect is an undeniable display of dignity. You must be careful. You can never allow your own quiet strength to slowly bury you alive. The psychological toll of the betrayal finally causes Arya's walls to completely collapse. She describes the absurdity of her betrayers treating their actions like an unavoidable natural disaster. Marcus insisted he never intended to cause pain. while Caroline weaponized her tears, claiming they simply could not control their feelings. It is a pathetic deflection meant to erase 6 months of calculated deception. Arya harshly judges herself for being blind, but Luca shifts the narrative. He tells her that her only mistake was trusting deeply flawed people. This highlights a painful truth. The deepest emotional wounds happen when we offer our purest loyalty to those who least deserve it. The camera lingers as Luca nearly reaches out to comfort her but stops. It is a masterclass in building tension through restraint. He sharply demands her attention, determined to reframe her perspective. He breaks down the psychology of the betrayal, insisting that their deceit reflects their own moral bankruptcy, not her lack of awareness. She failed to spot the warning signs because her mind is not built for manipulation. This points to a crucial lesson we all need. Never apologize for moving through the world with an honest heart. When Arya tearfully confesses that her honesty feels like a burden, Luca quietly assures her that this will change. Later, they exit the restaurant into the cool night air. Despite his waiting car, he dismisses his driver, choosing to walk beside her. After a long stretch of comfortable silence, he looks at her and asks her to reveal something entirely real, stripping away her final emotional defenses. He is asking for absolute vulnerability, a secret she has kept entirely to herself. Arya finally admits her deepest terror, the fear of regressing into her old patterns and allowing herself to be emotionally destroyed all over again. Luca stops their walk, forcing her to hold his gaze, and states with absolute authority that he will not let that happen. When she hesitates, he explains that her self-doubt is actual proof of her awareness. Those who repeat destructive cycles are the ones walking with their eyes closed. Arya desperately wants to believe him, but hope has become synonymous with impending pain. As the cinematic shadows of the evening stretch around them, a profound insight emerges. Confronting our darkest insecurities head-on is the exact mechanism that prevents us from repeating our worst mistakes. Take a closer look at the power dynamic when Arya bluntly asks what Luca actually gains from helping her. He allows the question to hang in the air before delivering a brutally honest response. He explains that he wants the privilege of watching her evolve into the formidable person she is meant to be, rather than the diminished version her past tried to create. He views this transformation as rare and entirely worth his investment. This resonates deeply because we all crave someone who can recognize our potential when our vision is clouded by grief. They walk until night falls, and as his car arrives, he leaves the timeline entirely up to her readiness. As the vehicle disappears into the city shadows, Arya is left staring at her reflection, fundamentally changed by the presence of this enigmatic protector. Narrative tension dramatically spikes when Arya is confronted with a new voicemail from Marcus. We understand that agonizing internal debate, knowing you should ignore the message but feeling consumed by the urge to listen. She finally hits play, and Marcus sounds entirely broken. His trademark arrogance has been replaced by desperate stammering and tears as he realizes the value of what he discarded. But the camera framing suggests this is just another calculated manipulation. It brings us to a harsh but necessary reality check about human nature. A beautifully worded apology can never miraculously repair a shattered trust. Regret always seems to knock the absolute loudest when it is finally too late for a second chance. The truest form of self-preservation is learning to keep that door firmly locked against the ghosts of your past. The moment the message ends, Arya makes a definitive choice. She deletes the audio and permanently blocks his number. This action is the very definition of taking your power back. We often forget that true healing is not a passive feeling, but the active choice to slam a door completely shut. Refusing to let fear paralyze her, she opens her laptop and officially accepts a major photography contract. Almost instantly, Luca texts her that he is proud. When she questions how he could possibly know, his response is simply that he understands her. It is an incredibly smooth, deeply calculated exchange. Lying in her quiet room, Arya questions if she is genuinely healing or just replacing one dangerous distraction with another. Growth is always terrifying, but remaining permanently broken is a tragedy we must actively refuse to accept. First time in what feels like an eternity, the suffocating anxiety releases its grip, allowing Arya to take a full, unobstructed breath. In the aftermath of trauma, these microscopic victories mean everything. A few days later, the pacing shifts dramatically when she receives a call from the legendary editor Elaine Cortez. Arya sits paralyzed, gripping her pen in disbelief. Elaine is commissioning a massive 12-page editorial on formidable women, and she specifically needs a photographer, capable of capturing raw, unflinching vulnerability. She believes Arya is the only one who can deliver. The sheer electricity of having your authentic talent recognized by the world is overwhelming. It reinforces a beautiful truth. Committing fully to your passion eventually pays off, provided you have the courage to endure the dark chapters. Elaine outlines the staggering details of the assignment. The shoot will take place in New York, completely funded, granting Arya absolute creative control and a massive $15,000 payout. You can see Arya's mind momentarily shut down, processing the reality that this kind of financial independence will entirely change her trajectory. She manages her tone to sound professional, but the moment the call ends, her hands begin to shake uncontrollably. This time, the tremor is not born from trauma, but from pure, untamed hope. She immediately messages Luca to share the victory, and his instant reply carries his signature quiet confidence. I know we are witnessing a profound emotional pivot. When the toxic phantoms dragging you backward are replaced by the terrifying thrill of a new beginning, you realize you are no longer surviving, you are evolving. Let's look at the psychology of the unexpected text message. Luca replies with the cold, calculated weight of a man accustomed to absolute control, revealing he instructed Elaine to make that call. He wanted to ensure nobody wasted Arya's time. We watch Arya spiral into a fascinating contradiction, profoundly grateful, yet deeply resentful of his interference. She fires back a text, demanding he stop managing her existence, but Luca counters with brutal efficiency. He merely opens the doors, walking through them. Is her burden alone? Boom. A reluctant thank you is sent, and instantly he commands her presence for dinner tonight. She hesitates, terrified by the blurring boundaries. The profound lesson here is simple. The most frightening thresholds we ever cross are the ones leading directly into a fiercely guarded heart. Luca sets the term 7 o'clock, zero room for negotiation. What follows is a brilliant study in anxiety. Arya spends 4 agonizing hours dismantling her wardrobe, rejecting dresses that scream too loud or beg too hard. Ultimately, she wraps herself in quiet armor, tailored black trousers and a dark silk blouse. The clock strikes 7, and a massive sedan idles by the curb. Luca waits in the back seat, swallowed by the shadows. As she slides inside, his voice drops, murmuring that she looks beautiful. When she tries to deflect the compliment, he effortlessly holds his ground, insisting it remains true every single time. Neon streetlights bleed across the tinted glass as they move. It serves as a beautiful reminder. Finding the right presence can instantly turn a chaotic, crushing metropolis into an entirely private sanctuary. He asks about their destination. Luca promises somewhere more quiet they leave the frantic city behind for a sleepy suburb, pulling up to a hidden bistro tucked beside an old bookstore. Inside, the room is warm, filled with dim lighting and mismatched vintage chairs. The owner actually greets this terrifying syndicate boss by his first name, guiding them to an isolated booth. When Arya asks if he comes here often, Luca stares at the table. He admits he used to come here to think, but today, he only brings the rare people he refuses to wear a mask around. He is handing her the keys to his sanctuary. The ultimate level of trust is finding a person who lets you drop the heavy act. Always hold tight to those rare souls who love you for exactly who you are behind closed doors. I are about to watch the story deepen. Arya sits across from the undisputed crime boss of the city. Completely disarmed by his sudden gentleness, she hides behind the menu as their drinks arrive. Wine for her, neat whiskey for him. Swirling his amber glass, Luca asks about the New York deal. Arya drops her guard, admitting she is terrified. She fears that if she fails, people will claim she only got the role through his dark influence. Luca simply stares her down with cold clarity. He tells her to let the cowards talk, because her undeniable success will force them into silence. Remember this simple truth. The heaviest chains we ever drag through life are the ones we quietly forge in our own doubting minds. Stop holding yourself back from the things you truly deserve. Luca leans back into the shadows, studying her with dark eyes that carry the weight of brutal street wars. He tells her she is burning energy on the wrong battles. Focus purely on the work, he advises, and block out the useless noise. Arya is practically dead on her feet, exhaustion hanging heavy in her posture. She asks if he thinks any of this is easy. The boss responds with a massive reality check. For a full decade, he built his crime family on pure fear, sacrificing loyal friends and wasting years trying to impress old money elites who despised him. The tragedy of his character is profound. Even sitting at the absolute top, he still feels like a total outcast. The hardest cages to escape are always the ones we build ourselves just to feel safe in an unpredictable world. Consider the midnight hour, where true confessions finally spill. Arya carries the crushing weight of the world, absorbing his words, while Luca stares into his glass like a philosopher reading the stars. The turning point of his life, he reveals, was the day he stopped waiting for anyone to grant him permission. He stopped bowing to snobby investors who viewed him as nothing but a thug. He trusted his own gut. Even when the cards were stacked against him, he understands a vital lesson. Playing it perfectly safe is the fastest way to lose your true self. When he took a heavy loss, he simply absorbed the pain and learned faster than his rivals. The thick tension slowly evaporates, leaving Arya with a rare, quiet peace, emboldened by the stillness. She finally finds the courage to pry into his darkest chapter. The instant she speaks Isabel's name, the room turns freezing cold. Luca does not raise a physical wall, but the shadows in his eyes grow incredibly dark. He delivers a shocking narrative twist. Isabel reached out a year after the betrayal, crying and begging for his forgiveness. He sat in silence, let her finish, and then calmly hung up the phone. It is a chilling display of boundaries. People rarely apologize to heal the wounds they inflicted. They often do it just to wash away their own guilt. Arya shivers, haunted by the memory of Marcus and his pathetic voicemails. When she asks if Luca regrets shutting her out, he gives a flat denial. He absolutely refused to be the medicine for her guilty conscience. You never owe closure to the person who willingly chose to break your heart. He freely admits his actions were brutal, but the absolute truth is rarely soft. The dinner plates vanish into the shadows, replaced by heavy mugs of black coffee. Arya grips the warm ceramic like a lifeline, desperate to stay grounded. She confesses a deep jealousy over how he commanded the wealthy crowd at the gala, wishing she possessed even a fraction of his impenetrable armor. Luca softly breaks her illusion. He tells her she already wears that armor, but she argues hers is completely fake. Here is the real lesson. Confidence is often nothing more than a desperate survival tactic. Luca leans over the table, revealing that every single elite in that ballroom was faking it. Power is merely the art of convincing the world you hold it, and then believing the lie yourself. For the very first time, she notices the faint lines of exhaustion framing his dark eyes. It is that profound fatigue you only recognize when you truly begin to care for a person. She softly asks if constantly playing this ruthless, untouchable monster ever drains his spirit. The silence that follows is heavy with years of unspoken regrets. Finally, the boss confesses that the burnout eats at him every single day. There is a terrifying realization that hits us all eventually. The hardest tragedy in life is spending years building a version of yourself that you no longer respect in the mirror. To quit now means facing that bitter reality, and he simply refuses to throw in the towel yet. Stunned by his raw humanity, she follows him out into the freezing night air to walk off the heavy truths. I know that walking through an empty city at midnight strips away all our remaining defenses. They drift down the silent pavement, washed in the yellow glow of street lamps. Without warning, Luca cuts straight to the infected root of her trauma, bringing up her toxic mother and sister. The painful truth is that you can never truly outrun your own blood. Arya confesses her spirit is fractured. Half of her burns with rage over the betrayal, while the other half just wants to fade into nothingness. She understands now that her mother will always elevate Caroline above her. It is a devastating pill to swallow. Realizing you were never the cherished child, Luca stops and asks the ultimate question. Will she actually lay down and let her sister steal the victory without a fight? Arya feels trapped, asking what move she even has left in this nightmare. Luca stops dead under the streetlights. He tells her she holds every choice in the palm of her hand. We are all the authors of our own stories, and handing someone else the pen is a fatal mistake you can never afford to make. She has the power to fight back, walk away, or forgive, but she cannot cower in the shadows while they dictate her reality. When Arya confesses she does not know how to fight, he reminds her how she conquered the room at the gala. She whispers that she only survived because he was her shield. The fear of abandonment is a heavy anchor. She admits she is terrified. He will eventually leave her in ruins. He promises to stand by her. But her old trauma desperately demands proof before she can believe him. He locks eyes with her, projecting a fierce confidence that commands the quiet street. He states plainly that he never does anything halfway, and he refuses to waste time upon people he does not fully believe in. When Arya meets his gaze, his unmasked honesty actually terrifies her. Consider this psychological truth. Genuine connection is far scarier than isolation, because it demands you step into the light without your protective armor. She asks what he actually expects from her. His voice drops into a low, authoritative cadence. He wants her to stop apologizing for taking up space, to end the constant second-guessing, and to trust her intuition. It is a monumental task to unlearn a lifetime of making yourself small to please others. He offers a slow smile, telling her she is already rising to the challenge. Let us pause and really feel this moment together, you and I. The air in the room is thick, heavy with an unspoken truth that neither Arya nor Luca is willing to voice just yet. But the fragile silence shatters the moment her phone begins to vibrate. A relentless alarm dragging her back to reality. Against her better judgment, she looks. It is Caroline. Her sister is weaponizing their shared history, flooding the screen with desperate apologies. Arya feels the familiar, suffocating grip of panic close around her throat. Luca watches the color drain from her face, his jaw tightening at the mere mention of her family. It is a harsh truth we all must face eventually. Sometimes the people who share our blood are the ones most equipped to bleed us dry. He watches her in the quiet, waiting to see if she will step back into the trap. The past crashes into Arya without warning. She is drowning in memories of childhood secrets, an unbreakable bond, and a laugh that used to make the world feel safe. But nostalgia is a dangerous architect, building beautiful facades over rotting foundations. Beneath those golden memories lies the raw trauma of their recent collapse. She sees Caroline standing in the wreckage, entirely unapologetic. Walking away from the very people who raised you is perhaps the most agonizing choice a human being can endure. Yet, she chooses her own peace. She whispers a quiet refusal, blocks the number, and powers the device down. Luca offers no judgment, only a silent nod of profound respect. Letting go is rarely loud or cinematic most of the time. It is just a quiet decision to finally stop letting them hurt you. With me here, because the contrast in this scene is absolutely vital. The city bleeds past the glass, a chaotic smear of neon and shadow, while Luca walks her to her door like a silent sentinel. When she offers gratitude for his protection, he dismisses it with a faint smile. He simply reminds her that her resilience runs far deeper than she knows. True. Growth begins the second you recognize your own capacity to endure the fire. Inside, the apartment feels hollow without his heavy presence. To chase away the creeping isolation, she floods the rooms with light, pours tea she will never finish, and opens her laptop. The hustle becomes her sanctuary, because in the wake of profound loss, building your own future is the only way to keep your mind from shattering entirely. You really need to analyze the psychology of this moment. Arya sits in the harsh glow of her screen, drafting a message designed to burn bridges. She is spelling out the brutal reality for her mother. Caroline and Marcus did not make a mistake. They made a calculated choice to betray her every single day for 6 months. She writes that she is done being the sacrificial lamb for family harmony. Drawing a definitive line often feels like you are tearing your own chest open. But preserving your peace must come first. Then comes the true display of emotional maturity. She stares at the devastating words, takes a slow breath, and deletes every single letter. True control is not about dropping the bomb. It is knowing you hold the power to destroy them, and simply choosing to walk away instead. Instead of descending into the toxic chaos of her family, Arya vanishes into her craft. She pushes herself late into the night, obsessing over concepts for her upcoming mission. Channeling grief into purpose is often the most effective armor against the ghosts that haunt the dark. For 3 weeks, her work is the only reality she engages with. Through it all, Luca remains a quiet anchor. He sends brief messages, checking if she has eaten, guarding her isolated world. She hoards these small moments, clinging to his loyalty as her only steady truth. But avoidance is never a permanent cure, and the past always demands a reckoning. 2 days before her flight, the fragile silence shatters, the phone rings, and the old life she tried to bury is suddenly demanding an audience. She stares at the screen as if it might explode, her instincts demanding she let it ring, but a tragic fragment of hope compels her to answer. Her mother's voice cracks through the speaker, offering a hollow apology and claiming ignorance of the betrayal. But here is a harsh truth. An apology wrapped in willful ignorance does nothing to heal a severed bond. Arya refuses to play the victim. She tears down the facade, reminding her mother how fiercely she shielded Caroline when the truth surfaced. When the older woman weeps about keeping the family whole, Arya delivers a chilling dose of reality. She coldly states that their family has been dead for a very long time. And then, there is nothing left but the deafening silence of a disconnected line. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? The silence following that confrontation is dense enough to crush stone. Her mother poured out desperate excuses, hoping to pave over the fact that she left her daughter to face the knife alone. You can feel the poison of years of resentment finally leaving Arya's system. There is no cinematic moment of forgiveness here, and frankly, there shouldn't be. Her mother is forced to sit in the uncomfortable ruins of her own failures. When the guilt-driven invitation to a family dinner is offered, Arya meets it with a cold, vague response. This is a profound reality of the human experience. Forgiveness is not a magical eraser, sometimes. True healing is simply surviving the lingering ache day by day, until the memory finally stops bleeding. When the call ends, there is no sudden rush of peace, but the air does not feel quite as heavy either. Progress is often measured in these quiet victories. The narrative shifts to the eve of her departure. Luca summons her to his inner sanctum. She anticipates a sterile, intimidating corporate fortress, but steps into a space rich with history. Warm sunlight and exposed brick suggest a complex man living behind the ruthless mask. The air in the room holds a sharp edge as he gestures for her to approach. Without a word, he slides a plain envelope across his desk. It is the financial backing for her new chapter, a sum large enough to alter her trajectory entirely. It serves as a striking reminder that our greatest lifelines often extend from the hands we least expected to catch us. Imagine the sheer weight of this moment. $20,000 stares back at her, and her emotional armor locks into place. She demands to know his motive, searching for the hidden string attached. But Luca remains unbothered, viewing the money not as charity, but as ammunition for the battles ahead. He insists she needs proper armor for New York. She attempts to refuse, but he dismantles her pride with quiet logic. He has watched her fight for scraps with broken tools, and now he wants to watch her conquer. When she vows to repay the debt, his only condition is that she create art so brilliant it outshines his dark legacy. The hardest challenge for a fiercely independent spirit is simply learning how to let someone else share the heavy burden of their survival. That subtle shift in his expression dismantles his intimidating facade, revealing the human core beneath the syndicate leader. He calls her impossible, and she deflects the vulnerability by throwing the exact same insult back at him. They exist for a moment in a rare, untroubled silence. Then he asks the pivotal question: is she truly prepared for the ruthless machinery of New York? She reflects on the brutal betrayals she has weathered, and the shedding of her naive past. She confesses her terror, yet remains steadfast in her decision to walk into the fire. Courage is never the absence of fear, it is the choice to move forward while trembling. As she leaves, he offers a profound parting truth. The most dangerous enemy you will ever face is the doubt living inside your own mind. Words fail her, so she offers a heavy nod and steps into the unknown. The transition is immediate. By morning, she is airborne, armed with professional equipment and a contract destined to rewrite her reality. Yet a profound grief anchors her spirit. It is the terrifying vertigo of standing between a closed door and an open abyss. Elevating your existence always carries the mournful weight of leaving a past self behind. Arriving in the city feels like a physical blow. The chaotic energy of millions of souls rushing through their own lives threatens to swallow her. Her hotel is a monument to modern isolation, cold and entirely impersonal. It is a sterile staging ground. Before we can truly build a new life, we must first learn to survive our own quiet solitude. I have probably both felt this exact paralysis. She is stranded high above the concrete labyrinth, crushed by the magnitude of the task ahead. Then her phone chimes. It is Luca, anchoring her from afar when she confesses her panic. He offers a razor-sharp perspective shift. He reminds her that the presence of fear is simply evidence that the outcome deeply matters. It is a vital truth to hold on to when doubt creeps in. The commission is a gauntlet, demanding she capture 8 elite subjects in 3 merciless days. She channels her terror into relentless preparation, analyzing notes until her vision blurs. The sun disappears before she even realizes she forgot to eat. True dedication often requires walking through the fire of our own anxiety to finally build a reality that truly belongs to us. Arya chokes down the cold remnants of hotel food, but sleep remains a distant rumor. The mattress is unyielding, and the chaotic wail of sirens outside only amplifies the restless static in her head. Surrendering to the insomnia, she grabs her camera and ventures into the concrete labyrinth. The city at 2 a.m. is an entirely different organism, feral, unapologetic, stripped of its daytime polish. She walks until her boots grind against her blistering heels. Capturing the gritty truth of the streets, she shoots the exhausted souls huddled over subway vents, the harsh glow of street lamps bleeding into wet asphalt. It is in these shadows that the camera finds its true purpose. Sometimes, You have to walk willingly into the dark to realize what you actually want to see. Clarity rarely comes in the light, it is forged in the shadows. Waits by the glass as the dark sky bleeds into a freezing dawn. Promptly at 6:30 the quiet shatters. It is Elaine, crisp and commanding, confirming the car is downstairs, catching her reflection in the harsh bathroom light. Arya barely recognizes the hollow-eyed phantom staring back. She is running on caffeine and unadulterated spite. Yet, in an environment built to crush the weak, spite becomes a perfectly legitimate armor. Arriving at the Brooklyn Gallery, she finds Elaine guarding the door like a seasoned enforcer. Their handshake is not a greeting. It is a quiet interrogation, a test of raw willpower. It teaches us a blunt truth: the world will always try to shrink you. But you alone decide if you are willing to fold under the pressure. Stick with me here, because the dynamics are shifting. Elaine brings up Luca's glowing praise, though her tone remains frostbitten. Batya attempts to brush it off, but Elaine shuts down the modesty, noting that Luca's judgment is notoriously lethal. Gesturing to the cavernous studio, Elaine essentially tells her to prove it. The primary subject is Maya Chen, a tech titan, who clawed her way to the peak of corporate dominance. Elaine warns that Maya is an emotional fortress. When Maya steps onto the floor precisely at 9, wrapped in a bespoke suit that radiates untouchable authority, the tension spikes. But observe closely, and you realize something fundamental. True power is often just the ability to hide your deepest scars behind an entirely flawless, unbreakable mask. She takes her seat with practiced grace, projecting a polite warmth that lacks a real pulse. She speaks in polished paragraphs that reveal absolutely nothing, her posture rigged for public consumption. The initial photographs are technically flawless, yet undeniably hollow. Realizing the shoot is failing, Arya does the unthinkable. She lowers the camera and asks the one question strictly forbidden by the publicists. Why are you actually doing this? For a fraction of a second. The titanium smile fractures. The exhaustion bleeding through that crack is entirely human. It forces us to confront a heavy realization. No matter how impenetrable someone's armor appears, every person is fighting a silent, desperate war behind closed doors. At the exact moment the corporate facade entirely shatters, Arya refuses to back down, pressing the executive on her motives. Maya already holds the wealth and the magazine covers. Why fabricate this narrative of spiritual success? The studio falls dead silent before Maya lets out a bitter laugh, admitting her publicist demanded a relatable persona. Then Arya delivers the fatal blow, asking if that human version of her even exists anymore. Maya physically caves in on herself. She confesses that she traded her own soul for the empire she now commands. The ruthless titan vanishes, leaving only a captive. It serves as a stark warning to us all. When you sacrifice your peace to conquer the world, the kingdom you build will inevitably become your own permanent prison. Confession pours out like a shattered dam. Maya admits she has survived on barely 4 hours of sleep a night for 3 years. She carries the crushing weight of 200 employees, terrified that one wrong move will ruin their lives. Arya's shudder clicks, capturing the raw edge of that psychological toll. When asked why she refuses to just walk away, Maya reveals her deepest fear without the heavy crown she despises. She is nothing but an empty void. For the next hour, Arya acts as a quiet confessor, carefully stripping away the hardened exterior to document the fragile humanity beneath. The tragedy of modern ambition is laid bare in those photographs. Our proudest achievements are often just heavy shields, hiding how deeply exhausted we truly are. By the time the session concludes, Maya disregards her rigid blazer, her face washed in the profound relief of finally being understood. The remainder of the day becomes a procession of beautifully damaged souls. A mother holding her family together by sheer will. A broken athlete trying to find worth outside the stadium. A writer who absorbed decades of bitter rejection. Every subject walks in carrying an invisible mountain of anxiety, yet they all willingly surrender their heavy armor to the camera. When the final guest steps into the night, Arya is physically drained, but her mind is brilliantly clear. It reveals a quiet truth we often forget sometimes. The absolute fastest way to heal your own hidden wounds is to create a safe space for others to drop their masks. Long after the studio empties, Elaine emerges from the shadows. She ruthlessly demands the unedited files by sunrise, leaving absolutely zero margin for error. In a rare display of respect, she admits she fully expected the city to break Arya today. Arya fires back with a dry remark, but Elaine's icy demeanor holds firm. She trusts her own lethal instincts, confirming Luca was correct about the photographer's grit. But victory is fleeting. The moment Arya returns to the sterile quiet of her hotel room, reality crashes down. Her screen glows with missed calls. 2 from her estranged mother, 1 from Luca, and 3 from an aggressive ghost of her past. Escaping into your work is easy, but eventually, you always have to return to the quiet wreckage waiting for you at home. Let's unpack this phone call together. Arya dials his number, gripping the plastic as if it might shatter. Luca answers with a deep, grounding tone, asking how she survived the fire. She admits it was terrifying but undeniably brilliant. When he warns her about Elaine's demands, Arya laughs, confessing it is already too late. Luca's genuine laughter echoes through the receiver, entirely disarming her panic. They speak for a long time about the brutal nature of the city, how it either forges you into iron or grinds you to dust by the time the call ends. The anxiety has evaporated. You and I have probably felt that same desperate relief. When the world is spinning out of control, one steady, familiar voice is often all it takes to remind you that your feet are planted on solid ground. Third day, the atmosphere in the gallery is thick enough to choke on. Elaine sits in absolute silence, scanning the raw images. The quiet stretches out, heavy and punishing. Finally, the gallery owner leans back. She admits the photographs are not just good, they are staggeringly brilliant. The iron band constricting Arya's chest suddenly snaps. When she attempts to express gratitude, Elaine cuts her off, reminding her that she earned every frame through her own sweat. Then comes the offer, a massive 3-month contract to document the raw human condition. Arya is left entirely speechless. It perfectly illustrates how real success actually arrives. It rarely comes with fireworks, it happens in quiet rooms, the very moment you finally accept your own undeniable worth. Manages to stammer an agreement, her pulse hammering against her ribs. Dismissed to celebrate, she wanders through the concrete canyons until she reaches the freezing air of Central Park, collapses onto a bench. Without warning, her phone vibrates. It is Marcus. Her toxic ex went so far as to buy a new number just to bypass her blocks. The urge to unleash years of buried anger burns hot in her chest. But consider the psychology of a parasite for a moment. Toxic people feed on your emotional reaction. Fighting them only validates their existence. Understanding this, Arya executes the ultimate strategic victory. She deletes the message without a single word, powers down the device, and allows the crushing silence to be her final answer. True closure is simply choosing not to engage. About to uncover what happens when you stop running. That evening, she retreats to a dimly lit Italian restaurant in a quiet corner of the city. Dripping candles and heavy shadows make it an ideal sanctuary to disappear. A waiter silently slides an expensive glass of red wine onto her table. Arya looks toward the bar, and there sits Luca, dressed in an immaculate suit. He looks like a man who commands the streets outside. With a slow nod, she invites him over. He slides into the booth, effortlessly lying about having random business in town. It is a beautiful kind of fiction. It shows us exactly what loyalty looks like in practice. People will cross entire continents just to ensure you are safe, all while pretending it was merely a coincidence. Look at this together. Luca leans in, asking how she is holding up. Arya admits she feels like she crawled out of a trench, yet Elaine already wants her for a huge project. Luca gives a knowing smirk, because he already knew. Arya sips her wine, defenses flaring, and asks why he really showed up. The heavy silence that follows dismantles her walls. He confesses he just wanted to make sure she was not celebrating a massive victory in an empty room. Arya chokes up, for someone who is always on guard. The hardest thing to accept is someone offering to take the watch while she rests. They spend the night analyzing the psychology of capturing strangers on camera. The lesson is simple. You do not have to fight every single battle entirely by yourself. Luca shares stories of a corporate merger collapsing because 2 stubborn executives refused to breathe the same air. In return, Arya opens up about Maya. She describes the exact second her boss dropped the iron armor, revealing the panicked human underneath. Luca points out that this is her true superpower. She uncovers the exact secrets people try so hard to bury. Later, walking through the neon chaos of Times Square, Luca mutters that he hates the city because absolutely everyone is faking a persona. Arya shoots him a sideways glance, reminding him that he fakes his own persona constantly too. The truth of life is that we all wear heavy masks every single day, right up until we find someone safe enough to let us finally drop them. He gets defensive, his voice taking in a sharp edge. He insists he only plays the ruthless boss behind closed doors, not for random strangers. Arya stops walking and looks right through him. She asks if he ever lets anyone see the real version of himself. The man who is not constantly playing a mind game. Luca turns, locking his gaze onto hers. He tells her he is letting her see it right now. In that exact moment, the screaming city completely mutes. Finally, he breaks the stare and whispers that they need to leave. Back at her hotel, she tries to thank him for having her back, but he just sighs. When someone truly shows up for you in the dark, offering gratitude is often just another protective shield. The real lesson is learning to simply accept the comfort. He steps forward and pulls her into a solid, grounding hug. With me here to set the scene. This was not some polite pat on the back. Luca wraps Arya up like an anchor against the freezing cold. Her whole body freezes in shock before she finally caves into the warmth. When he pulls away, that icy stare is completely gone. He tells her she did something incredible, warning her not to let Marcus or anyone else steal her hard-earned win later. Pacing her room wide awake, she stares at the raw photos on her laptop. Every single face on that screen screams pure, unfiltered truth. Here is the real lesson. You only start to heal the second you stop running and choose to own your actual power. But just as that realization settles in, the quiet peace of the room shatters. Her phone buzzes on the nightstand. It is Marcus. The text from Marcus is heavy with audacity. He claims he knows she does not want to hear from him, but admits she deserved better. In the past, this would have destroyed her now. Arya does not even blink. Her fingers fly across the glass. She tells him he is exactly right. She does deserve better, and to never contact her again. Blocked and deleted in one swift motion. The past is finally dead. The next morning, flying back home and looking down at the city, she is no longer running like a victim. She is stepping into her own authority. The truth is, genuine growth is never a gentle process. It is the fire you have to walk through to forge a brand new spine. She lands at the airport, and Luca has already sent his dark sedan to pick her up, a quiet, undeniable show of respect. Stepping back into her apartment feels surreal, like walking into a museum. The furniture is the same, but her internal landscape has shifted entirely. She sits at her desk, and an email from Elaine drops. Attached are the final selects. Her name will be in the credit next month. Arya clicks the folder, hands trembling as she stares at 12 raw, gorgeous portraits. She actually pulled it off, right on cue. Her phone rings. It is Luca. He skips the small talk and simply asks if she saw the email. She whispers that she does not even know what to say. Luca replies with his grounded, steady logic. He tells her to just feel it. Life teaches us many things, but giving yourself permission to actually sit and feel your own victory is often the bravest choice you can make. The tide washing over her right now is profound. She bet her entire soul on this creative risk and won. She quietly thanks Luca for believing in her before she even knew the rules of the game. His voice drops into a steady rumble. He explains that this is simply what he does. He spots the quiet potential people hide away and waits in the shadows for them to realize it themselves. They stay on the line, shifting to the looming anxiety of the holidays, debating whether she should finally face her mother. Luca offers a striking piece of wisdom. He tells her to do what is true, not what merely keep peace. If you do not know what that truth is yet, just wait. The lesson is vital. Clarity never arrives when you are desperately rushing to please everyone else around you. All ends and the quiet of her apartment finally feels safe. Arya looks at the raw, unflinching portraits on her monitor. She is laying her ghosts to rest. The toxic shadow of Marcus is gone. The rivalry with Caroline is over. And that fragile apology from her mother? The terrified woman who used to shrink away from conflict has vanished. Arya opens a blank message and types out a firm, incredibly clean boundary. She explains she is not ready to see Caroline, but she is willing to meet her mother alone. We spend so much of our lives waiting for the perfect apology from the people who hurt us. But the truth is, sometimes drawing a permanent line in the sand is the exact closure we need to move forward. She hits send, locking her hard-earned peace securely into place. She lets out a long breath and dives straight back into her work. You and I know the brutal reality of outgrowing your past. It is never a clean process. 2 agonizing days drag by before her phone lights up with a reply. The message from her mother is cautious, completely stripped of the usual family guilt. She agrees to come over on Saturday, just the 2 of them. Arya reads the text 3 times, scanning for a hidden trapdoor, conditioned to expect betrayal. But there is nothing. It is a genuine olive branch. She sends a brief confirmation for 2 o'clock. The waiting period is torture. Healing is incredibly strange that way. It forces you to sit patiently in the uncomfortable quiet, till you are finally strong enough to open the door and face what is waiting on the other side. explore the frantic ways we try to outrun our ghosts. Picture Arya glued to her glowing monitor in the dead of night. She is editing those portraits to prove to herself she is no longer a victim. Luca calls her twice during the week. They discuss obscure films, carefully dodging the heavy emotional weight in the room. She eventually admits she is running on empty, just to outpace the rising panic. Luca calls her out immediately, asking if she is truly rebuilding her life or just dodging incoming bullets. The raw truth is that staying constantly busy is often a protective trick to keep from falling apart. By Friday night, Arya is scrubbing already spotless floors and rearranging furniture past midnight, forcing her hands to keep moving so her mind cannot wander. Finally collapses onto the couch, staring around her aggressively clean apartment, searching for any sense of calm. Saturday arrives, freezing cold and miserable. Arya burns her breakfast, throws it out, and downs a cup of bitter coffee. She changes her clothes 3 times as if preparing for a tactical mission, pretending she is fine while her heart hammers against her ribs. Right at 2 o'clock, her mother's car pulls up. Arya watches through the blinds as her mom steps out. Clutching her purse like physical body armor, she looks fragile, worn down by years of silent tension. A profound lesson becomes clear here. The most intimidating strangers you will ever face are often the people who raised you. Arya pulls the door open. 2 simple greetings hang in the frozen air. Her mother freezes before leaning in for a stiff, brittle hug. She holds Arya delicately, as if embracing a live explosive. Arya hugs her in return, feeling that collision of something deeply familiar and entirely alien. She invites her inside, and her mother scans the living room like a nervous traveler seeking an exit. They sit across from one another at the small kitchen table. Arya pours 2 cups of tea, simply to give her trembling hands a task, knowing full well neither will drink a drop. She quietly thanks her mom for coming. Her mother just grips the mug, staring into the dark liquid. The reality of human connection is stark. The absolute heaviest, most transformative conversations of your life will almost always begin with a crushing, heavy silence. We're going to unpack this moment together. Arya plainly tells her mother she did not expect her to show up. Her mom admits she was not sure she would either. When her mom asks how she has been, Arya keeps her shields raised, giving a brief update about the photography shoot. Then comes the twist. Her mother reveals that her father saw the photos online. He is genuinely proud of her, even if he is too cowardly to say it. That revelation hits Arya like a physical blow, shattering her defenses. Then her mother takes a shaky breath and delivers a bombshell. She offers a raw, unfiltered apology, admitting aloud that she failed her daughter. True healing is never easy. It only begins the exact second someone finally has the courage to look you in the eye and admit they were entirely wrong. The dam breaks, and the bitter truth comes spilling out. Her mother admits that when Arya desperately needed a protector, she chose the comfort of a fake family peace instead. She genuinely believed she was holding their world together, but she was just dodging the crossfire while her daughter absorbed every brutal hit. She confesses she was terrified of confronting Caroline, so she simply froze. She tells Arya her inaction was a miserable failure, and Arya looks back with a quiet, heavy ache, silently agreeing her mom does not ask for forgiveness. She just wants Arya to know she finally sees the massive wreckage she caused. It is a harsh lesson for us all. Choosing a comfortable illusion over a hard reality will always destroy the people you care about the most. Arya swipes a hand across her face, realizing she is actually crying. She finally asks the heavy question that has haunted her. Why did you never say this before? Her mother breaks down, admitting she was too busy forcing everyone back into a suffocating, fake normal, but that illusion is dead. She realizes now that by covering up every mess, she taught Caroline she was untouchable. Worse, she taught Arya that her own feelings were worthless. She built a fragile family empire where the most toxic person always won, and now she is forced to live in its ruins. Arya just stares at the broken woman across the table. Here is the bitter truth we must all face. The loudest aggressive demands will always drown out the quietest needs, right up until the foundation cracks and the whole house falls apart. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? This is the massive shift we have been waiting for. Arya walked in braced for the usual empty excuses and toxic deflections. Instead, she gets hit with raw accountability. Arya asks about Caroline, keeping her voice incredibly quiet. Her mom gets this absolute steel in her eyes. She admits she finally confronted her, and Caroline is losing her mind over it. Arya hits back with a cold, simple statement that it is good she is upset. Her mom actually drops the hammer, declaring she is done playing the middleman. There will be no more forced holiday forgiveness. It is powerful to watch someone finally step up. Real growth always demands this exact kind of firm boundary. You simply have to stop shielding destructive people from the painful consequences of their own actions. The tension in this scene is thick enough to cut. You can physically see the heavy iron knot inside Arya finally start to unravel. She whispers, barely daring to believe it, asking if her mom actually dropped that bomb. Her mom confirms it without blinking, saying Caroline hated the truth, but that is her own problem now. Outside, the city is screaming with sirens, totally oblivious to the heavy emotional repair job happening at this tiny table. Arya keeps it entirely grounded. She honestly admits she does not know if she can forgive either of them, yet she demands total loyalty going forward. Her mom has to back her up, not just keep the fake family peace. It is a profound realization. Real loyalty means standing right inside the fire with the person who burned, instead of just hushing them up to keep the neighbors comfortable. Her mom looks her dead in the eye and promises she has her word, but Arya refuses to take the easy bait. She stares right through her and drops the coldest truth, reminding her that words are incredibly cheap. Surprisingly, her mom takes the hit, telling Arya to watch her actions instead. For the next hour, they just talk about wonderfully normal things. They discuss photography and laugh about her dad fixing a stubborn porch light. It feels like a brief window into the days before this family drama exploded. When her mom leaves, they share a long, genuine hug. Obviously, this is not some instant magic fix, and the deep scars remain. But as Arya collapses on the couch, she feels a massive weight finally lift off her chest. Sometimes, simply wanting to believe someone is trying to change is a solid enough foundation to start rebuilding your own peace of mind. Arya sits there, soaking in the heavy grief mixed with a fragile hope that she can actually fix her life. Right on cue, her phone buzzes. It is Luca, checking in to see if she survived. She texts back that it went better than expected, but was more exhausting than she wanted. Luca simply tells her to turn her brain off and not try to figure everything out tonight. Arya actually smiles and hits him with a surprise invite for a Sunday drive. He hates surprises, but caves anyway. She rolls up the next day in her dad's completely busted old sedan. Luca folds his tall frame inside and stares at the cracked dashboard in pure horror, asking if this junker is really her ride. She tells him not to judge, and the easy banter just flows. Life constantly proves that the absolute best healers are the ones who can make us laugh right after a massive emotional breakdown. They roast each other as they ditch the concrete city, driving into a quiet countryside that feels off the grid. Luca is visibly stressing. The guy absolutely hates not being in control, and he keeps begging to know their destination. Arya just leans into the mystery, teasing him and refusing to drop a hint. Finally, the tires crunch onto a gravel lot next to a huge battered old barn. A swinging wooden sign reads Westfield Art Collective. Luca stares at this dusty setup like they just landed on another planet, asking what the deal is. Arya kills the engine, staring dead ahead through the dirty windshield. She quietly admits this is exactly where she used to go before her entire life imploded. It is a harsh but necessary reality. Sometimes you have to go back and face the ghost of who you used to be, just to figure out who you desperately need to become. With me here, because context is everything. This place is the golden era, before Marcus ruined her confidence, before New York, and long before she forgot her own raw talent. They push open the heavy barn doors, getting hit with the comforting smell of sawdust, wet oil paint, and dark coffee. The walls are covered in chaotic local art in mismatched frames. Sitting behind a messy desk is Ruth, a wonderfully fierce older woman, holding a battered paperback. Ruth locks eyes with Arya and roasts her without missing a beat, joking about how she finally remembered her roots. She marches over and crushes Arya in a massive hug, smelling of lavender and old cigarettes, teasing her for going Hollywood. It shows that your true passion never actually dies. It just waits patiently in the dusty corners of your past, until you are brave enough to come back home. Watch how this unfolds. Ruth turns her intense gaze onto Luca, hitting him with that brutal assessment only tough older women can pull off. She demands to know who he is. Arya introduces him, hyping Ruth up as the legend who originally taught her photography. Ruth fires back that Arya clearly forgot all those lessons, grinning the entire time. After shaking Luca's hand, Ruth's tone gets surprisingly soft. She quietly reveals that she kept all of Arya's old artwork hanging in the back corner, admitting she never had the heart to take it down. Arya chokes up, entirely blindsided by this unexpected loyalty. Ruth just waves them toward the dusty light, ready to show Luca the magic Arya used to create. It proves that your true legacy is always protected by the people who loved you, long before you started wearing a fake mask for the rest of the world. Let us step into this dusty back room together, where her literal past hangs in stark black and white. 6 striking photographs, Arya snapped 3 years ago, are pinned to the wooden wall. We are talking about gritty local faces. A tired farmer, an exhausted diner waitress, a greasy mechanic. These are the everyday people you and I would probably walk right past, but she captured their souls with brutal honesty. Luca is totally frozen, staring silently at the wall. He mutters that these shots are seriously heavy and completely holed up. Ruth just snorts from her desk, feeling totally vindicated. The tragedy is that Arya spent years chasing hollow validation in the city, entirely blind to her own raw talent. It is crazy how the hardest thing in the world is recognizing your own true value when you are too busy begging for a toxic crowd's empty applause. The barn goes completely silent, save for the old wood creaking. Luca turns to her, eyes locked on hers, and asks the golden question. Why did she bring him out here? Arya lets out a long, heavy sigh. She needed him to see her true origin story. She wanted him to understand exactly who she was before she twisted herself into a fake socialite, just to survive in Marcus' toxic world. She literally sold her soul for a seat at a table full of snakes. Luca turns slowly, and the vibe in the room shifts hard. He asks if she knows the real reason he kept picking up her calls and bailing her out of drama. His voice actually catches when he admits she reminded him of a piece of himself he buried years ago. We all lose our way sometimes. But the right people act as perfect mirrors, reflecting the exact pieces of our soul we honestly thought were dead forever. Luca completely flips the script. Pointing at the portraits, he drops absolute truth. He tells her the only work that leaves a permanent mark comes from people who refuse to surrender their souls. Those fake galas are garbage. Her real superpower is seeing broken, invisible people and making them look like legends. Arya is choking back tears, terrified she cannot be this raw artist and still survive the brutal city. Luca does not even blink. He stares her down, saying she has to stop believing the lie that success equals selling your soul to the highest bidder. Later they drive back toward the city in a comfortable silence while the sun sets. You and I have probably both made this mistake. We forget that sometimes the most profound support someone can offer is just ruthlessly believing in the person you already are, without wanting to change a thing. The steady hum of the engine is the only sound, until Luca shatters the silence with a quiet thank you. Arya keeps her gaze locked on the empty road, asking what he means. Let us look at what is really happening here. He strips away the illusion, explaining that their social circle is obsessed with performing a perfect life, terrified to show the muddy roots of where they began. Arya tightens her grip, whispering that people are just afraid of their broken pieces. Luca looks out the window, his voice dropping low. He tells her she is far braver than she knows, and she will survive the wreckage of this chapter. She cannot even find the words to speak. Handing your bruised heart to someone is a terrifying risk, but dropping your armor is the only way you will ever be truly seen. Thanksgiving arrives, stripped of all the usual exhausting performances. Arya sits on the couch with her father, eating cold Chinese takeout, while the football game hums softly in the background. Her father does something remarkable here. He refuses to interrogate her about the bitter end with Marcus or the deep cuts of betrayal from her friends. Instead, he meets her eyes and simply says he is proud of the resilient woman she is building herself into. That one quiet sentence anchors her entirely. The following weeks dissolve into long hours at work and fragile conversations with her mother. But the peace is interrupted right before Christmas, when an unknown number lights up her phone in the dark. It is human nature to protect our peace, but sometimes, to permanently close the door on your past, you have to turn the handle one last time. You and I have probably both felt that exact stomach-dropping dread. Arya answers, and a trembling voice confirms it is Caroline. All warmth leaves the room. Arya responds with a voice carved from pure ice, asking what she wants now. Caroline sounds shattered, crying for forgiveness and admitting the gravity of what she destroyed. Then comes the inevitable collapse. Caroline confesses that she and Marcus are completely finished. We might expect Arya to revel in this karmic justice. Instead, there is only a hollow weight settling in her bones. She lets out a long breath and quietly tells Caroline she's sorry for her pain. That is the true mark of evolution. Clinging to anger only burns your own house down, while the person who hurt you sleeps perfectly soundly through the night. The psychology of this moment is fascinating to witness. Caroline is falling apart through the receiver, wrapping herself in the victim narrative after her betrayal. She admits the ugly truth. that she was selfish and terrified of being alone. How does Arya react? She sits at the edge of her bed and delivers absolute, unyielding stillness. There are no comforting lies offered, no soft reassurances. She realizes Caroline is not seeking true reconciliation. She is simply drowning in her own guilt and desperately needs an audience for her confession. We must learn to recognize this difference. Sometimes an apology is never meant to rebuild the broken bridge between two people. It is merely the arsonist needing someone to watch them stand in the ashes of what they destroyed. The silence stretching between them is heavier than iron. Finally, the tension cracks, and Caroline whispers the painful confession that she misses her former friend. You can see the internal war across Arya's face. Her instinct is to fall back into their old rhythm and comfort her, but the wounds are too profound. She delivers a heavy, undeniable truth. She whispers that she misses her too, but shared grief does not erase the permanent stain of betrayal. Caroline accepts the reality. When the call ends, Arya is left staring into the empty space of her room. There is no cinematic embrace here, and there is no grand forgiveness. Real healing rarely arrives with a dramatic fanfare. It usually appears as a quiet mourning, where you realize the heavy weight you carried yesterday is simply gone. Processing the emotional earthquake, Arya sends a quick message to Luca, confessing she feels completely hollow. Luca steps up as a pillar of stability, reminding her that rebuilding a shattered life is an inherently messy process. When Christmas arrives, Arya chooses to spend it in absolute solitude, editing her photographs and pulling peace from the silence. But then New Year's Eve rolls around, and Luca shatters the quiet by calling her up. His voice is vibrant, asking her exactly what her plans are. He brings her into a private dinner with his closest trusted friends. I want you to pay attention to this subtle shift. Finding a group of people who allow you to breathe without demanding a rehearsed, perfect version of yourself is the most profound safety net a person can ever build. For a brief moment, she hovers over the screen, debating whether to vanish into the safety of her apartment. Ultimately, she agrees, but lays down a firm boundary. If the energy feels wrong, she is walking straight out the door. Luca just laughs. Unbothered by her armor, she arrives at a hidden restaurant where 5 of his friends sit around a table. Radiating an effortless warmth, they do not treat her like a case study. They do not pick at the scabs of her heartbreak or ask exhausting questions. They simply celebrate the privilege of stepping into an unwritten year, folding her into their shared laughter. There is an unspoken, powerful magic in sitting among strangers who simply allow you to exist, without secretly trying to extract pieces of your soul for themselves. We are halfway through the evening when the narrative shifts gears. One woman leans across the table, lowering her voice to share a secret. She tells Arya that Luca speaks about her constantly, entirely captivated by her photography, and that he never champions anyone quite like this. Arya is caught off guard. She steals quiet glances at Luca, who is oblivious, passionately arguing over something trivial down the table. As the countdown to midnight hits, the group spills out onto the freezing pavement, passing cheap champagne under the streetlights. In that exact moment of shared chaos, Arya feels a heavy, rusted lock within her finally give way. Here is the beautiful truth of the human experience. You do not need to have every broken piece perfectly glued back into place to finally start living again. Group drifts apart. Luca walks her back to her car, hands buried in his pockets like a scene from a classic film. He tells her the group adored her, then casually drops a massive question. He mentions his friend Sarah was wondering if Arya was single. You can almost hear the sudden pound-on of her heart. She turns softly and asks if he is actually the one trying to find out. Luca completely freezes. He meets her gaze with quiet, intense vulnerability and whispers, "Are you ready for me to ask?" The tension is electric, but Arya makes a mature choice. She is done being the passive character waiting for romance. She smiles gently and tells him to ask again in a few months. Listen closely. You cannot force the harvest when your spirit is still repairing the soil. Luca does not pull away or let his ego take over. His expression softens into an understanding smile, quietly promising that he will wait. He pulls her into a warm embrace under the streetlights. There is no desperate rush here, just pure, unshakable respect. As Arya drives home, bright fireworks echo against the dark sky. She reflects on the ghosts of Marcus and Caroline, realizing she has officially outgrown the small boxes they tried to keep her inside. But her thoughts drift back to Luca. You and I must remember this fundamental law of life. The most brilliant chapters only begin the moment you stop trying to force the plot. Every shattering disappointment you endure is simply a stepping stone, guiding you directly back to your own authentic strength. She is ready for the morning. Recovering from a massive betrayal is never a flawless, clean process. There are still mornings when Arya wakes up with a hot anger in her chest, mourning the trusting version of herself that was stolen. But here is the critical pivot in her story. She does not let that dark agony consume her. She weaponizes it, turning that exact pain into the ultimate driving force for her ambition. 3 months later, her boss Elaine calls with the news that her photography feature is publishing. When the magazine arrives, Arya treats it like a priceless artifact. She opens it to find 12 brilliant pages, showcasing her raw, profoundly human portraits. When the world attempts to hand you a devastating defeat, the ultimate victory is taking those exact broken pieces and using them to construct your own unbreakable empire. Right there at the bottom edge of the paper, stamped in permanence, are the words she waited her whole life to see. Photography by Arya Vale. Tears blur her vision as her shaking hands dial Luca to share the victory. In a classic act of deflection, she tries to hand him the credit, claiming she could never have reached this summit without his guidance. But Luca refuses to let her play small. He instantly shuts the narrative down, telling her the fire was always entirely hers, and he was merely standing nearby to watch it burn. For the first time in what feels like years, a genuine unburdened laugh escapes her. Let us take this truth to heart. Sometimes the most courageous action you can possibly take is to stop apologizing for your own hard work, step out of the shadows, and simply allow the world to see you shine. She drives straight to her childhood home. The moment the door opens and her mother sees the printed magazine, tears of genuine pride well up in her eyes. Later that evening, Arya shares a single portrait online. It is not a plea for validation, but a quiet nod to her own hard work. The response is massive, but then comes a ghost from the past. Marcus, her toxic ex, emerges from the shadows to praise her art and apologize for his mistakes. She stares at his name. Without hesitation, she presses delete. No dramatic reply. No reopened wounds, just pure silence. Here is a truth you and I must both face eventually. Sometimes you have to watch what you thought you wanted burn away just to clear the soil for the fierce, unstoppable strength you always had inside. Months later, the transformation is absolute. Arya stands in her solo exhibition in a Brooklyn gallery, her name stretching across the wall in bold lettering. Luca stands beside her, quietly studying a photograph of a weary librarian. He turns to her, saying she built this entirely on her own. The atmosphere shifts as she faces him, offering an unexpected pivot. She asks if he is finally ready to answer that lingering question from New Year's Eve. Luca looks entirely stripped of his armor, vulnerable and open, whispering that he is willing to try. The lesson here is wonderfully simple. You must lay the bricks of your own sanctuary before you lower the drawbridge for another soul. You have to learn how to stand entirely on your own 2 feet first. He lets his guarded smirk melt away, replacing it with a deeply genuine smile that reveals his humanity. He whispers his agreement and gently takes her hand. For the first time, Arya feels entirely anchored, not because a man offered her validation, but because she had the courage to choose herself first. The gallery opening becomes a monumental triumph, drawing praise from critics and securing a book deal. Even Caroline tries to crawl back by sending an expensive bouquet of flowers. Arya simply leaves them on the counter, letting them wither into dry petals. It is a quiet, powerful statement. Let this settle in your mind. Life can be an agonizing mess, but it also hides profound beauty. Build your own unshakable foundation first, and only then invite someone up to admire the view. Imagine the scene. Her parents stand before the gallery walls, utterly speechless, holding hands as they take in her triumph. Later, the doors lock, leaving Arya alone with her striking photographs. She allows herself to look back at the shattered version of herself from a year ago. That girl who believed her worth was tethered to toxic people is completely gone. In her place stands a woman forged directly in the crucible of her own pain. Here is a vital lesson to carry with you. Your darkest chapters are never the conclusion of your story. They are simply the brutal forge where your next era is created. Arya hits the light switch and steps out into the biting winter air. The vast unknown no longer terrifies her because she finally understands exactly who she is. Let us speak honestly about betrayal. You and I both know having a knife twisted in your back is not something you can just wash away. You conquer it by elevating yourself into a spaces where that old malice can no longer reach you. Arya constructed a towering fortress of self-respect. She walked directly through the flames and emerged entirely untouched. She did not win by letting her heart turn to stone. She won because she realized her intrinsic value is never up for negotiation. No tragedy will ever diminish her light again. Standing out there in the quiet dark, letting the freezing winter air fill her lungs, that unshakable certainty becomes her ultimate weapon. The agony of the past is nothing more than a fading ghost now. She has finally claimed her absolute freedom.
Luca plays an important role in Aria's transformations, but the story is careful to show that he does not save her in a simple way. He opens doors, gives guidance, and helps her stand in rooms where she once felt powerless. Yet the best thing Luca does is not make Aria dependent on him. He keeps reminding her that the power was already inside her. This creates a valuable lesson about healthy support. The right person does not replace your strength with their own. They help you recognize the strength you forgot you had. Luca introduces Aria to opportunities, but she must still do the work. He helps her enter the gala, but she must face Marcus and Caroline herself. He connects her with prestige, but she must prove her talent through the photographs. This is important because after betrayal, people can become vulnerable to anyone who offers comfort. It is easy to mistake rescue for love. But real support does not control, manipulate, or turn someone into a project. Real support creates space for growth. Luca's belief in Arya matters because it arrives at a time when she no longer believes in herself. But his greatest gift is not his money, influence, or status. His greatest gift is that he sees her potential and waits for her to catch up to it. For viewers, the lesson is clear. Surround yourself with people who make you braver, not smaller. The right people will not ask you to become a shadow of them. They will encourage you to return to your own voice, your own work, and your own identity. Arya's success is meaningful because it becomes hers. She walks through the door Luca opens, but she is the one who earns her place inside.